What's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our Benny's Bats edition for Friday, May 20th. We got a big 15-game slate, so I'm going to get right into it for you guys today. The first game up is going to be Atlanta going up against Philadelphia. We got Aaron Nola pitching for Philadelphia. Nola's been really good to start the year. 2.89 ERA, a whip of only 0.85, 58 strikeouts in 53 innings. As we know, this Atlanta offense is really bad. I mean, literally, they are historically bad. You look at their WRC plus, it's down in like the 40s. You know, their WOBA's below 100. Basically every offensive category that you look at, this team is pretty much struggling. The best bat they have is Freddie Freeman, who's been kind of cold to start the year so far. Outside of him, though, there's really not a lot in this lineup that's going to scare me. So I think Nola's in a pretty good spot here. Not really looking at any bats on Philly. On the other side of the game, we have Matt Whistler, and he's been much better so far in 2016. He actually put up 2 really good games in his last 3. His ERA right now is at 3.14. His whip is at 0.99. I mean, last year, this was a guy who gave up a 300 batting average to left-handed bats. So everyone's going to be like, oh, start all the left-handed bats against him today. But he's been a lot better this year. You look at that Philly lineup, if you take Odubel Herrera out, which I think he's probably going to be. I know he's listed as day-to-day. He got hurt the other day, didn't play in the last game. You know, really the only guy on their team that has over a 3.39 WOBA against right-handed pitching is Andre. Not be in the order somewhere in the 2 hole. I would love to tell you guys like, oh, Ryan Howard, but he's not the same player that he was. So I really don't see a lot of bats in this Philly side that I want to attack either. On a 15-game slate, I'm perfectly fine staying away from this game. If I'm going to do anything, I'm probably using the pitchers. Next game we can talk about Colorado at Pittsburgh. Garrett Cole's on the mound for Pittsburgh. And even though people are saying he's having a bad year, I mean, his numbers aren't all that bad. He's got an ERA of 3, a whip of 1.16, 39 strikeouts in 41 innings. And, I mean, this is a guy who was a very, very good pitcher last year. I mean, he was dominant at times. So I think he's starting to round himself back into shape. You look at that Colorado lineup, I mean, Cargo's the guy with the best numbers. He's got a WOBA over 400, an ISO over 300 against right-handed pitching since the start of 2015. But he's not really swinging the bat all that well. If you watch his at-bats, you know, yesterday, the first at-bat, he almost looked lost in that game. He, swung at a pitch that he probably shouldn't have out of the strike zone on the first pitch. You know, he wound up like lazy ground balls reaching for pitches on the outside corner. So, I know Cargo stands out the most on the numbers, but I don't really like the way he's been hitting lately. The 2 guys who actually do kind of stand out are the 2 righties. Story's been hitting really well. 362 WOBA, 303 ISO for him. Had a couple big hits yesterday. I think he had a home run, a double, a single. It was like a triple short of a cycle. So even against right-handed pitching lately, he's starting to hit a little bit more. So, this guy is definitely a solid option to consider. And then Nolan Arenado is always going to be in play. He's very good in righty-on-righty situations. 385 WOBA, 303 ISO score for him as well. Definitely somebody I think we can take a look at. Although, again, with a 15-game slate, do you really want to target a lot of guys against Garrett Cole? I mean, I think there are softer spots. The other side of this game is one of those softer spots. We got Eddie Butler pitching for Colorado. Left-handed bats this year are hitting 353 against them. Last year, he gave up a home run about every 5 innings to left-handed bats. So a guy like Gregory Polanco is definitely somebody who stands out to me. He got moved up in the order. He's hitting in the 3 spot now. Like I said yesterday, he's been getting some singles for you. He's been driving in runs. He's been scoring runs. Just doing a lot of stuff overall that's been positive for the team. John Jaso on top of that order has been pretty good as well. Another left-handed bat you can look at. Then the 2 righties that are up there in the top 4 of that order as well. You got Andrew McCutchen batting second, 368 WOBA, 200 ISO against right-handed pitching. And then Jung Ho Kang, who just came back, still pretty cheap, 366 WOBA, 194 ISO for him. So I like all 4 of those guys up there at the top of the order. I think all 4 of them are going to be in play. Next game we can look at, we got Cleveland going up against Boston. And we got Corey Kluber on the mound for Cleveland. Left-handed bats have been the way to get after him. 281 batting average they have this year. Last year they hit 262. He's lights out to righties, so I don't think you really want to look at any of the righties. But, guys like David Ortiz, 422 WOBA, 333 ISO, still mashing right-handed pitching. He could be a viable option to look at. Another guy like Travis Shaw, who's been hitting very well for this Red Sox team. 375 WOBA, 210 ISO for Shaw. He bats in like the 5 or the 6 hole in that lineup. but he's been knocking around base hits, doubles, going 2 for 3, 2 for 4, 3 for 4. He's a much better hitter than I thought he was at the beginning of the year, and I actually think the Red Sox are better off with him than they would have been if they kept Panda in that spot. On the other side of this game, we got Clay Buchholz. Buchholz has given up at least 5 runs in 5 of his 8 starts, gave up 4 runs in one other start where he got pulled early, so he's been a guy that's just been getting knocked around this year. Left-handed bats have a higher average. Right-handed bats have actually hit more home runs against them, though. So I think you can look at a lot of these bats on this Cleveland team. Jason Kipnis, probably my favorite one, 389 WOBA, 170 ISO score. Good left-handed bat, hits right-handed pitching very well. Rajay Davis has been unbelievable the last couple games. He's putting up, 20, 30 fantasy points a night, hitting home runs, stealing bases, getting hits, scoring runs, just doing a little bit of everything for this offense right now. And he's still pretty cheap. So he's another guy I think we can consider. And then you can look at, Francisco Lindor, who's been amazing lately. Switch hitter. So he'll be batting from the left side against Buchholz today. Had a bunch of hits yesterday, knocked in a couple runs. And then Carlos Santana, another guy that's got some power, had a double dong yesterday, excuse me, had a double dong yesterday, right-handed power bat, right-handed bats have been hitting home runs off Clay Buchholz. So I think Santana's another guy we can look at as well. Next game we can talk about, we got Milwaukee going up against the New York Mets. Steven Matz on the mound for the New York Mets. Matz has been pretty good this year. Right-handed bats have a little bit of a higher average against them, so this isn't exactly an easy spot. You got guys to deal with like Ryan Braun, huge 421 WOBA since the start of 2015, 248 ISO score to go with it, so he does have some home run upside, although Citi Field, not the easiest park to hit a home run out of. And then you also got some of those guys at the top of the order. Shortstop Jonathan Villar, 370 WOBA, 163 ISO. He can get you a couple base hits, get on base, steal some bases, score some runs. So he's a viable option as well. Domingo Santana, 424 WOBA, 236 ISO, doing very well against left-handed pitching at the beginning of the year here. And then you have the other power bats behind them. Guys like Chris Carter and Jonathan Lucroy, both right-handed bats, both hit left-handed pitching pretty well over their career. Carter's got a lot of power. Lucroy's more of an average hitter, but he can jack one out every now and then as well. So I don't think this is a very soft spot for Matz. I think he's going to see a lot of really good right-handed bats towards the top of that order for the Brewers, and I think he might struggle a little bit here today. On the other side of the game, we got Wiley Peralta, who is probably one of the worst pitchers in the major leagues. Left and right-handed bats have been lighting him up. Left-handed bats have a very high home run rate against them. So, you look at this Mets team, who don't you want? Granderson, 4,200, he's pretty cheap. Conforto, 3,800, very cheap. Lucas Duda is under 4K. David Wright's under 4K. Neil Walker's under 4K. And then even Jonas Cespedes in righty-on-righty matchups. Cespedes hits right-handed pitching very well. Peralta's not exactly getting a lot of right-handed bats out either. Lefties and righties both hitting about 300 against them over the course of the last year and a half. So I think basically everybody on this Mets team is in play. The Mets stack will probably be pretty popular today, but against a pitcher like Peralta, it does make a lot of sense to have some exposure here. Next game we can talk about, Seattle going into Cincinnati. Iwakuma's on the mound for Seattle, and he's really been struggling this year. Left and right-handed bats are both hitting him well. Usually left-handed bats are the one with a higher average against them, and they also have a high fly ball rate, which is a very bad thing for him in this park. The Great American, ballpark, also known as the Great American Bandbox, is, a stadium where home runs fly out, I think, at the top rate of any stadium in the majors. I'd have to double check if that's still the case, but I know last year and at the beginning of the season, it was the park that had the best park factor for home runs. So I think the left-handed bats are definitely the way you want to go here. Joey Votto, probably my favorite. Homered yesterday for me, 404 WOBA, 221 ISO score. He hasn't had the greatest start to the year, but it's just such a good spot for him, such a good matchup. I think he's somebody in play. I think you can look at a guy like Billy Hamilton, another left-handed bat, as long as Iwakuma is struggling with him. I also think if Hamilton gets on, there's a good chance he can steal some bases, so he can get you some points that way. And then Jay Bruce as well. Bruce has a lot of upside with his power. So he's another one of those left-handed power bats against a guy who gives up a lot of fly balls in a stadium where fly balls tend to keep carrying over the fence for home runs. I think Bruce could be somebody in play too. The right-handed bats I'm not as high on, but if you want to complete the stack, you can look at guys like Cozart and Suarez. Also really like a guy like Adam Duvall, who's batting in like the 7th hole for them, which doesn't make much sense. But you look at this guy's game log, and he's just been hitting the ball really well lately, been showing his power, knocking in runs, so he could be another guy that you might want to include there if you do decide to stack up Cincinnati bats against Iwakuma. On the other side of this game, we got Dan Straley, and he was a long reliever who they converted to a starter, and he's been lights out since becoming a starter. ERA under 2, whip right around 1, striking out about a guy per inning. The problem with him is he only goes about 6 innings because he's not somebody who's going to throw 110 pitches. He doesn't go very deep into games. So you do wind up getting into that Cincinnati bullpen, and the Cincinnati bullpen's not all that great. So I do think Straley will have a pretty good game and kind of keep the Seattle team off balance for the first couple innings. But everybody's going to get probably 2 at-bats against the relief pitchers here today. So most of their relievers are right-handed, and most of them aren't all that good. So when the relievers do come in, the only 2 guys I'm really looking at, Robinson Cano against all these righties, 370 WOBA, 208 ISO. He makes a lot of sense to me. And then the other guy is Nelson Cruz, because like we said, home runs tend to fly out of this ballpark. And Cruz is a guy that can, jack a home run out of any ballpark. So 368 WOBA, 228 ISO against right-handed pitching for him. It's not his preferred split, but that's still pretty good numbers. And like I said, his power is going to play in any park, especially a park that gives up home runs at the rate the Great American Ballpark does. Next game, we can talk about Tampa Bay at Detroit. Anibal Sanchez on the mound for Detroit. Right-handed bats, reverse splits, actually have a higher average against them the last couple of years. And one of the problems with Sanchez is he has a huge home run rate, gives up a lot of fly balls, and a lot of them tend to go over the hill. You look at this Tampa Bay team, and they've actually been hitting well lately, especially the long ball. You got guys like Pierce, Longoria, Sosa, with Anibal Sanchez struggling more with the right-handed bats. I think all those guys are in play. And then the one left-handed bat they have with a little bit of power is Corey Dickerson. Not a huge fan of this guy, but I think he's okay if you're putting a stack in there. I also think he's okay as like a one-off in the tournament because he basically is, a guy who's going to go like 1 for 4 with a home run or, 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. So if you catch the home run off him, you probably want to, use that in the tournament. Not somebody that I think should be anywhere near your cash games, even though he does profile to have a, decent matchup against Sanchez today. On the other side, we got Matt Andriese, the rookie, and this guy's been pretty good in 2016. Left-handed bats do have a higher average against them. He's been very tough on right-handed bats, but the other drawback is he's kind of a fly ball pitcher. I don't know. This is a tough matchup for me because, Detroit is all right-handed bats, but they're right-handed bats that have some home run pop. So while Andriese's been tough on the right-handed bats, he's also been giving up a lot of fly balls, and, fly balls tend to turn into home runs. I think that these Detroit bats, I don't think they're going to bat around against them. But I do think that 1 or 2 of these guys could tag him for a home run with the high fly ball rate that he has. So, pick and choose. Which guys do you want to throw in there? Is it, Kinsler or JD at the top of the order who've been on fire? Do you want to go with a guy like Miguel Cabrera? A guy like Nick Castellanos has been hitting very well over the last couple months. I guess Justin Upton, he's probably the one guy I want nothing to do with. I do like Victor Martinez if he's in there as a left-handed bat. The lefties are the way I'd rather go after Andriese. He's the only guy as a switch hitter that you're going to see from the left side in this Detroit lineup. So he's probably my favorite play of all of them. But again, I still think there's some other spots here that are pretty good today. Washington going up against Miami. We got Tanner Rourke pitching for Washington. Right and left-handed bats have been solid against them. Like 250, 260 average the last couple of years. Not spectacular, but, it's not like he's shutting them down either. I think the left-handed bats is where I'd really want to go. If Derek Dietrich's leading off, I really like him. He's still cheap. 373 WOBA, 222 ISO score. Left-handed bat at the top of that order. He's somebody that makes some sense to me. Christian Yelich having a great season. Very solid player. Very good cash game play because he's consistent. He's getting you a couple hits every game. He's getting up with RBI opportunities. He's got a big bat and Stanton hitting behind him that can drive him in. But then Stanton would be the other guy. 365 WOBA for Stanton, 287 ISO score. We don't have to talk about the power that this guy has. Everybody's seen it if you've seen him bat up and hit, 1 home run. This is a guy that hits 450, 470-foot home runs. So just absolutely massive power that he has. So he's somebody else I think you can consider against Rourke. On the other side of this game, we got the lefty, Nicolino on the mound. Right-handed bats obviously have a higher batting average against him. He's been very tough on lefties, though. So, not a big fan of Harper and Murphy today. I know either one of them has the ability to just jack one out at any point in time, but I'd really rather attack him with the right-handed bats. A guy like Ryan Zimmerman, 417 WOBA, 336 ISO in his at-bats in the last year and a half against left-handed pitching. So I think he's somebody that's going to be low-owned and definitely deserves a look. Another guy I want to look at, too, is Jason Worth. I know he hasn't been playing all that great, but the numbers against lefties are phenomenal. 388 WOBA, 330 ISO score. He's 3 for 5 against Nicolino lifetime with a double already. So he, profiles well and has hit him well in limited opportunities. Next game we can talk about Kansas City against the Chicago White Sox. Jose Quintana, the lefty, on the mound for the White Sox. He's been awesome this year. Right-handed bats actually have a higher average against them. He has a very low home run rate the last 2 years. He gets a lot of ground balls, doesn't give up a lot of fly balls. So I don't really love this Kansas City offense today. The one guy who stands out based on the numbers is Lorenzo Cain. 4 ISO score. Cain hits very well against left-handed pitching. So he is probably the one guy on this Kansas City offense I wouldn't mind taking against Quintana, but it's GPP only. I mean, Quintana's been very good. He's got a low ERA. He's got a low whip. He's got a high strikeout number. This is probably the best season he's put together in the majors so far. On the other side of the game, we got Dylan G. Left-handed bats have a higher average against him, and he's a guy with a high fly ball rate. So I like him better when he's at home in Kansas City. On the road in Chicago, he could struggle a little bit here. High fly ball rates mean I want to look at some guys with home run power. So righty on righty, there's nobody better on Chicago than Jose Abreu. 372 WOBA, 224 ISO. He's been hitting the ball really well lately. Actually got robbed of a home run yesterday. I think it was they played Houston. I think it was George Springer that caught it. Went up at the wall and just robbed Abreu of a home run. So he's seeing the ball and hitting it well, even if the numbers aren't showing up in his stats. I think he's going to have. And then the other guy I'd look at would be the left-handed bat and Adam Eaton up at the top of the order. Over 360 WOBA, not a huge ISO score. He's not really a big home run hitter, but he is a guy that's going to be on top of the order. He's going to get max at bats. He can get a couple singles for you, score some runs, maybe steal a base or two, and be a solid cash game play at the price. Next game we can talk about, we got Texas at Houston. Kobe Lewis is on the mound. Left-handed bats have a higher average against him, but right-handed bats have actually been the ones that have hitting all the home runs in the last 2 years. Part of the reason for that is this is a guy with a huge fly ball rate, and this game is moving from Texas to Houston. Houston is a very good home run hitter's ballpark, so I think the fact that you got Kobe Lewis in a home run hitter's ballpark is probably not a good thing for Kobe Lewis. You look at the top of that Houston order, that's where a lot of the damage gets done. Guys like Altuve, guys like Springer, guys like Correa. Even a guy like Marwin Gonzalez, there's a lot of guys, Kobe Rasmus. I mean, guys that have a little bit of power, Gaddis, if he's in there, the rookie Morin, if they put him in there again at mid price, all these guys with high home run power, I think are in play today because Lewis is an extreme fly ball pitcher. Houston is a ballpark where fly balls tend to fly out for home runs. So you want to kind of look at some of the guys with power. I would prefer the left-handed bats, but the only one that I really trust even a little bit is actually Rasmus. But if you want to go with guys like Castro or, a Valbuena or maybe a Preston Tucker, if any of them get in the game, those are viable punt options if you're, looking for some cheap stuff. But for me, they're tournament only because it's basically boom or bust. They're going to hit you that home run or they're going to wind up getting you like 3 to 7 fantasy points and, not really being the best way to spend your money today. I'm a little confused about the other side of this game. We got Lance McCullers coming up. Now, if you remember this guy from last year, he was a high strikeout pitcher, very, very dominant for short periods of time. And then he had a little bit of elbow trouble. This year, at the beginning of the season, he was on the DL. He came back last time, made his first start against a Boston team that was basically putting up about 15 runs a game at the time. So I can excuse the rust that he had there. Right-handed bats in a reverse split situation have actually been better against McCullers. And there aren't too many right-handed bats on this Texas team. I mean, you're basically looking at guys like Desmond and Beltre. There's a couple of these lefties here who hit right-handed pitching pretty well. Namely, a guy like Nomar Mazara, 390 WOBA, 200 ISO. You can look at guys like Fielder or Moreland. I hate trying to choose between these two guys. Moreland has more power upside. Fielder's probably a little more of a consistent hitter, but neither one of them has been superb to start the year. Rognan Odor, if he's not serving his suspension, I don't know when that's actually going to start for, the right cross he threw on Jose Bautista the other day. if he's not serving his suspension, left-handed bat at the top of that order against McCullers could be somebody else. When McCullers is right, he's definitely not somebody I want to target against, but this is only the second start of the season that he's making. I don't think he's going to go deep in this game. You're probably going to get a lot of bullpen, so you get 2 at-bats or so against him, 2 at-bats against the bullpen. And again, like I said, he wasn't great in his first start, so I don't know if he's 100% back to, being that dominant guy right now. So I think for a tournament, stacking up Texas bats is probably something that I wouldn't mind having a little bit of exposure to. I don't think I'm using McCullers yet until I see that he's throwing 100 pitches and, really looks like he's back to the guy he was when he was dominant at points of last season. Next game we can talk about, Toronto at Minnesota. Got Aaron Sanchez on the mound for Toronto. He's been pretty good. He is very, very tough on right-handed bats the last couple of years. Left-handed bats, definitely the way you want to attack them. It's tough for this Twins team because, you have Joe Mauer as a left-handed bat who they've been batting at the top of the order. But then after that, you're looking at all righties, Eduardo Nunez, Byung-Ho Park, Miguel Sano, Trevor Plouffe. All these guys are very good right-handed bats, but like we said, Sanchez is tough on the righties. So I don't think this is an easy spot for a lot of these Minnesota bats. Like I said, Mauer probably the one guy that stands out, but how often do you really play Joe Mauer at first base? I don't think I've played Joe Mauer, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years since he was catcher eligible. It's probably the last time I put him in a lineup or had him on a, season-long fantasy team. So he's a solid hitter. I guess you can look at him, but, like I said, I don't really think this team profiles very well today. On the other side of the game, we got Tyler Duffy, and Tyler Duffy is somebody that you may not realize, but go and check his game logs. He's got 3 straight very, very good games. Left-handed bats, probably the way you want to attack him because he's been really tough on the right-handed bats. For Toronto, that kind of spells out guys like maybe a Justin Smoke, 348 WOBA, 232 ISO for power, has been hitting cleanup in that order. You got a guy like Michael Saunders, who they dropped from the leadoff spot to the 5 spot. I liked him so much more when he was leading off, but they decided to lead off Joey Batista yesterday. I think they went Batista, Donaldson, Encarnacion at the top of the order. So if that's the case and you get Saunders in the 5 hole, yeah, he has a little more RBI upside there, but he probably loses in at-bat, so not as appealing to me, but he's somebody else that I guess you could say is in play. And then obviously the 3 big bats at the top of the lineup, the righties. I know Duffy has been tough on righties, but Batista, Donaldson, and Encarnacion are guys with a long track record of hitting right-handed pitching pretty well. I just keep waiting, like a lot of other people are, for this Blue Jays team to finally start hitting because we all know that they're better than what they've shown so far this year. But so far this year, if you've been, stacking up the Blue Jays waiting for that explosion, you've just been burning money. They haven't done it yet this year. So until I actually see them do it, I don't think I'm going to put too much credence into it. Next game we can talk about, we got Arizona at St. Louis. Carlos Martinez is on the mound for St. Louis. Left-handed bats have a higher average against him. That's really the way you want to attack them. So I guess Jake Lamb is probably the guy that stands out the most. Pretty much the only left-handed bat I like on Arizona towards the top of that lineup. Been hitting in the cleanup spot lately, especially, with David Peralta out for a while. So Lamb is probably the best bet. You look at Martinez, he's tough on right-handed bats, and he's been tough on these Arizona right-handed bats. There's not a lot of good BVP at all if you look back into the game log history. So I think this could be a pretty sneaky spot for Martinez. St. Louis, not a great hitter's ballpark. I think Martinez could be in for a pretty good game here today. On the other side, we got Patrick Corbin. Right-handed bats the last 2 years have hit over 280 against them with a pretty high home run rate. I think that means you want the righties on this Cardinals team. Steven Piscotty hitting out of the cleanup spot yesterday, easily my favorite. 431 WOBA, 232 ISO, low owned every day. People just keep sleeping on this guy, but he seems to be the next in a long line of really solid, Cardinals hitters that we've seen over the years. So I have no problem rolling him out there again, especially at low ownership. Almeida Diaz, another guy, hitting a 2-hole yesterday. 401 WOBA, 200 ISO. If he's going to be hitting towards the top of the lineup as a shortstop, cheap shortstop option, I think he's somebody we got to consider. Doesn't have a lot of pop, but this guy just keeps getting base hits and walking and getting on base. He can steal a base for you. He can score a couple runs. I think he's a really solid cash game play if you're looking at it. And then yesterday, if you watched the game, Randall Gierchuk got hurt and had to leave the game early. So I guess we're probably going to see some more at-bats for either like a Tommy Pham or a Jeremy Hasselbaker going forward. And also opens it up for Matt Holliday, who they've kind of been sitting a little bit, whether they play him in the outfield or at first base, or they kind of move some guys around. I think Holliday's going to start seeing a few more at-bats with Gearchuk out as well. And I like him as another right-handed bat to go up against Patrick Corbin. Next game we can talk about, my New York Yankees going up against the Oakland Athletics. CC Sabathia is on the mound. Now, he's been much better this year. Right-handed bats have been the way to get after him the last 2 seasons. This year they're hitting about 270, 280. Last year they hit over 300 against them. So guys like Danny Valencia definitely stand out. 392 WOBA, 215 ISO. Chris Davis is actually better in righty-on-righty situations, but this is a guy that's got massive power, has, 3 or 4 home runs in the last week, 12 or 13, I think, now on the season. So, he's still somebody that I think you got to be concerned with. He's a viable option. And then Marcus Semien, who's been batting towards the bottom of that order, he's always been good against left-handed pitching. 382 WOBA, 197 ISO since the start of 2015. So I guess if you're looking for somebody down there, you can put him in. You got some switch hitters at the top of the order too, guys like Coco Crisp and Billy Burns. I don't think CC Sabathia is ever going to get back to the guy he used to be. And I don't know if the guy he is now is somebody that I would be afraid to take bats against. I know he's pitched better this season, but I don't know how long he's going to be able to keep this up. So I don't think that an open stack is the worst idea here today. On the other side of the game, it pains me to say it, we got Sonny Gray on the mound, and he's normally been a really solid pitcher, but in 2016, he's been getting lit up. Right-handed bats have been the ones that have really lit him up, and that's shocking because normally he's pretty tough on right-handed bats. In 20 innings pitched, they're hitting over 300 against him with a 1.94 whip and 6 home runs in 20 innings. So 1 every 3.3 innings, basically. Those numbers are horrible. I mean, the only right-handed bat on the Yankees right now, I think, is Starlin Castro. So he would be, I guess, the guy who profiles best. And then you got to ask yourself whether or not you want to test, Sonny Gray with some of these left-handed guys that have some power. Guys like, I haven't been playing Tex much, but maybe a guy like McCann, maybe a guy like Beltran. You have Gardner and Ellsbury, 2 more left-handed bats at the top of the order. Not so much home run hitters, but guys that can, get you some hits, get on base, and set the table for the guys behind them. So I don't know. I mean, Gray has been that bad this year that I think a Yankee stack might be a viable thing. People are talking about starting Gray because his price is only $6,800. Until I actually see him pitch one decent game, I don't think I can put him in there as my starter. But I would have absolutely no problem if somebody decided in a tournament to take bats against them. I don't know if I would really go nuts taking bats against them in cash, but I have no problem stacking up the Yankees in the tournament. Baltimore at the LA Angels today. Hector Santiago, the lefty on the mound for the Angels. Right-handed bats, higher average, have hit a ton of home runs against them. Santiago has a huge fly ball rate. He's a guy that sabermetricians hate because his numbers are a lot better than his underlying numbers, meaning if you just look at the ERA and the strikeouts and the whip, you'll be like, wow, this guy's a really, really good pitcher. If you look at the underlying numbers, though, it feels like he's just been extremely lucky because with that high fly ball rate, he should have given up more home runs, and he actually did give up, I think it was 26 home runs in like 135 innings or something like that to right-handed bats last year. So he did give up a lot of home runs. But again, it could have been even more with the numbers that he had. Batting average at balls in play is very low, which is, something that usually means he's been getting lucky. Or, the other thing that you could say is, maybe he just induces a lot of ground balls that go right to guys, part of the way he pitches. That has a little bit to do with it too. So I don't want to completely discount it and say this guy's a scrub. But if you talk to some of the sabermetrics guys, they'll tell you that, if you're looking for a guy who's due for regression, Hector Santiago is that guy. On that Baltimore team, you want the right-handed power bats. Machado actually doesn't hit incredibly well against left-handed pitching, which is surprising considering how well he hits in righty-on-righty matchups. Chris Davis is okay against lefties and very cheap today. So if you're looking for, something that most people won't do, using Chris Davis in your Orioles stack or even taking him as a one-off at like 36 or 3,700, I think he is. He's very, very cheap. Could be a sneaky option. The guys you really want to look at, though, Mark Trumbo, 360 WOBA, 270 ISO. He's been unbelievable lately. You also got Adam Jones, who owns left-handed pitching throughout the course of his career and is starting to heat up. You look at his game logs for the last 2 weeks, he's back to being that feared hitter that we knew him as, 2 or 3 years ago. So, Adam Jones and Trumbo, definitely 2 guys I wouldn't mind having exposure to. On the other side of this game, we got Mike Wright pitching, and I don't think Mike Wright's a very good pitcher. Left-handed bats have usually been better against them, and there really aren't a lot of lefties on this Angels team outside of Cole Calhoun, who's been okay. Mike Trout, I think, is in play against anybody. 415 WOBA, 293 ISO, absolutely on fire lately. Had a stolen base and a home run yesterday. I think he had a home run game before as well. He's been getting 2 or 3 hits a game, pretty consistently over the course of his last 10 games. So, if I need to tell you about why you should play Mike Trout, you probably shouldn't be playing daily fantasy baseball anyway. Guy's a stud, top 2 or 3 player in the league, and I think this is a pretty good spot for him against a really weak pitcher in a pretty decent hitter's ballpark. Next game we can talk about, Chicago Cubs going up against San Francisco. Jake Arrieta's on the mound. I'll make this easy. I don't take bats against Jake Arrieta. I think he'll still have a pretty good game here. The guy's 7-0 on the year. He's got an ERA of 1.29, a whip of 0.84, over a strikeout per inning. Just been absolutely dominant, going deep into the games, keeping teams off balance. Just a really, really good pitcher. Like I said, the San Francisco offense isn't horrible. The game is in San Francisco, which is a great pitcher's park. I'm not taking anybody all season long against Arrieta. To me, he's not Kershaw level, but he's probably up there, probably about the closest thing we have right now at this point, in the National League to Kershaw. And he's another guy who I think reached that plateau where I'm just not taking bets against him. It doesn't mean you have to take Arrieta every day, although I do like him today, even at the price. But bats against him, just like bats against Kershaw, it's an auto fade. You don't even got to worry about it. On the other side of this game, we got Jake Peavy. Right-handed bats have been smashing him over the last 3 years, even though earlier in his career, left-handed bats have been the way to get after him. I just don't think Peavy's a very good pitcher anymore. So, this Cubs offense hasn't been hitting the way they had the first month of the season, but they're still so talented. I mean, Chris Bryant, somebody I definitely like, 377 WOBA, 208 ISO, righty-on-righty matchup, although he hits well in righty-on-righty matchup, so I have no problem with it, especially with, Peavy giving up like a 280 batting average to right-handed bats the last, year and a half. I think Bryant's in a very good spot here today. I like him a lot as a third base or an outfield option since he's eligible at both. Anthony Rizzo, 395 WOBA, 274 ISO against right-handed pitching. Dexter Fowler leading off at the top of the order. Ben Zobrist, Hayward, even if you want to go down to guys like, Javi Baez and Addison Russell. I mean, this Cubs team is there's just hitters from top to bottom. So Peavy is a guy that I think is over the hill at this point. So you can take any bats you want against him today. I'll definitely have some Chicago Cubs stacks and tournaments, and I'll definitely have some Cub exposure in my cash games as well. Next game we can talk about, we got Scott Kazmir pitching for the Dodgers going up against San Diego. San Diego is a little bit better against left-handed pitching. A guy like Matt Kemp, 359 WOBA, 244 ISO. Myers is like 348 WOBA, 135 ISO. Solid, not spectacular. I still think Kazmir will have a pretty good game. The San Diego lineup is not really imposing, but they have knocked around a couple lefties at, various points of the season. And they've also been shut down. I mean, full exposure, They've gone both ends of the spectrum. They've had good games against lefties, and they've had horrible games where lefties put up big numbers against them too. So I guess it really comes down to how you feel about Kazmir. He does have some strikeout upside. Doesn't usually go too deep into the game. 6 or 7 innings is about the most we'll get out of him. Very good pitcher's park in San Diego. Although remember, left-handed bats do hit some decent home run rates in San Diego. San Diego is not a horrible home run park. They moved the fences in. They kind of changed the dimensions around a little bit. So I do think that Kazmir's in a decent spot, although I don't love him today. On the other side of this game, we got Christian Frederick, who used to pitch for the Colorado Rockies. Left-handed pitcher making his second start of 2016. You really want to look at the right-handed bats against them. This Dodgers team, if you remember, is not very right-handed, but they do bring in guys like Kike Hernandez and Trace Thompson. Trace has been amazing against left-handed pitching lately, jacking out home runs left and right. Kike's WOBA and ISO numbers are just eye-popping against, left-handed pitching in the course of the last season and a half. Both of these guys are right-handed specialists that should be in the order against the lefty. And then the last guy I want to talk about is Yasiel Puig. He's been ice cold, but he's another guy that hits left-handed pitching pretty well over the course of the last couple seasons. Again, he's been ice cold. They dropped him down to like 7th or 8th in that batting order, which is, for Yasiel Puig, I mean, this is a guy that people were still taking in the first 4 or 5 rounds of, season-long fantasy drafts at the beginning of the season, even though he had a little bit of a down year last year. So I don't know. I mean, I think he has the upside where he could jack out a home run for you, but he also could go 0 for 4, and I really wouldn't blink an eye or think all that much of it because he has been that bad to start this year. And that sums it up. I'm running out of breath here. 15 games that we went through today. Very big slate for MLB DFS. A lot of action out there, a lot of big tournaments, whether you play on Fantasy Draft or Fantasy Aces or FanDuel or DraftKings or, any of the other smaller sites that pop up. I do think there's a lot of option. There's a lot of good pitching here today. Love Jake Arrieta up top, to be honest with you. Love some of those bats on Chicago as well. I think that's going to be, some of the popular plays. Again, the Chicago bats are expensive, though. I don't think they'll be the most owned stack, but that's fine. If you can figure out a way to fit them in, I think they're going to be in a good spot today. So that wraps it up for our Benny's Bats edition here at rotocurve.com. Thank you guys for joining us. And as always, stay classy, DFS.